So recently, Kenya has deployed troops to the DRC. And in its defense, it's protecting its interest, Kenya's interest. So let's talk about that. This is a Speak Up Africa. The K is always constant. My name is Anyona Bulungu.
And mine is Wangeshi Karemi.
And this is episode 4. Keep listening in. Remember to follow us across all our social media platforms at Speak Up Africa. Again, the K is always constant.
All right.
So, Wangeshi.
Let's first start by mentioning that Eastern Africa is always one war away to the next clash. We are just one election, one conflict, one something to the next war.
One
which we
political
need.
statement.
One political statement. What we are so fragile as a region when it comes to peace and security that it is not worthy. It's something that we actually need to talk about. And recently, the DRC joined the East Africa community, so now they have added on to the fragility of the ecosystem in peace and security in Eastern Africa, and it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing to note that also that two of the least safest places in the world are found in East Africa. This is
Yeah.
South Sudan and
And
Somalia.
Somalia,
So
yeah.
how are we moving forward with such information? I feel like it's important, even though our focus is in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. It is important for us to actually look at our neighbors and how the wars they are having are affecting us, and what are we doing about it, and how by the end of the day are they affecting the youth. You started by saying the DRC war. What do you think about Kenya sending their troops over there?
I mean, of course, they wouldn't send it, and apart from interests in terms of political stability in the region, and in terms of economics and everything, every single aspect, because every single aspect of life is affected once there's war. It always takes you like 10,000 steps backwards, but it's just important as neighbors, as sisters, regionally, to protect each other when one country, because it's not the first time Kenya is helping out a country.
It's not.
It's not the first time a country in war. But the problem now, what we need to be talking about is that if as a region we still have countries that are at war, then it becomes a problem. Because earlier on this year, the war spilled over to Rwanda.
Yes, and Uganda.
And Uganda. And you see that that's not just taking DRC 10,000 steps backwards. It's taking also Rwanda and Uganda. And to me, it's very interesting to say the very least.
You see, both of these countries are they want to be part of the political trajectory of the stable DRC when it becomes stable. Because DRC is a very rich country when it comes to the minerals
Yeah.
and also the population and
Yes.
the land.
Yes.
So everyone wants to be involved with them.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be involved with them. The East Africa community particularly wants to be part of the trade. They want to actually have a relationship with them and be part of the trade. And that is why
As they
actually
should. I mean, as they
DRC
should.
joined the East Africa community. I was thinking this morning, I was thinking that was not quite a wise decision because DRC has been fighting for a really long time. But when you look at it from the future perspective, when you're not just, you have like futuristic thoughts, it is very important to notice the way and the importance of DRC as a country to Central and East Africa generally. But then by the end of the day, when you look at the history of deploying troops, it's important to actually look at it from like different perspectives. Like when the DRC, when Kenya deployed the troops to DRC, they spent about 4.5 billion Kenya shillings. And that is estimated to be spent over the next 6 months. Now, we have seen DRC fight for years and years and years and years. That money is just for 6 months. How long are we going to have to stay there?
I mean, like, if they've been fighting for a long while now, it doesn't mean, yes, they have. It doesn't mean they can never get to a point where, the country now is peaceful. That's the goal. That's why Kenya is stepping in to help. And I'm sure it's not only Kenya, other countries are participating, even if it's in smaller, capacities. But the whole point of helping is that so that there is peace. So
Yes.
that we no longer have that history of having DRC being at war, because it also faces other challenges. Just the other day, okay, not the other day, but like the other day, if you compare it to like as opposed to 10 years ago, it's just the other day there was a volcanic eruption and people were displaced. So you see, if natural occurrences are going to displace people, we don't also want things that can be stopped, things like war, to also keep displacing people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the whole point is that it's stopped, even if it's going to take 6 months. We want to get to a point where it's peaceful. where we no
to the
longer
point
have
where
that.
it is there's
Yes.
no war. It is important to notice some of the trajectories, some of the extrapolations that have been made.
Mm.
The conflict for foreign relations had a tracker, and they
Mm.
said that they see the war in DRC actually spilling over to Burundi, to Uganda, and to Rwanda. And we've actually seen it come to Rwanda and
Mm.
to
Mm.
Uganda. The other day, Uganda and Rwanda were fighting. Kigali and Kampala had a war, and it led to the closing of the border.
Mm.
Now, see, that stopped
Katuna.
trade. Katuna border,
Yeah.
it's called the Katuna Post or the
Katuna border.
Katuna
Border
border.
post.
Uh,
Something
the
like
trade had to stop. Okay,
Mm.
there was a lot of maliciousness between the peoples of these different countries, and you see, these are people
Mhm.
that settle in other countries. You're Ugandans settling in Rwanda, and your Rwandese settling in Uganda. It's Rwandese.
Yeah,
I was not
Rwandese.
sure about that when I
Rwandese.
said.
I've heard so many people say Rwandan.
Ah,
Yeah, but
okay.
it's
So you're Rwandese
Rwandese.
settling in Uganda. So there was a lot of ill treatment. There was a lot of looking down upon each other. And there's a lot of person to person fights before we even get to actually the brutal killings and the beatings and the everything. There was
Yeah.
a person to person fight.
Mm.
So when you look at what led to them, doing the border closing and everything. Of course, there was a personal relationship between Uganda and Rwanda, but a lot of it has some relationship to the war that is going on in DRC. A lot of it has a lot of relationship to that because we have Uganda and being interested in the political trajectory that is happening in DRC. And then we have Rwanda at the same time also wanting to be part of that and to be part of the stabilization of DRC in their own little way. So when you look at it from that angle, you see that the wars that are surround the East Africa region, by this I mean the Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya, actually affect us. They affect us deeply. And we can even extend this conversation to refugees coming into the countries.
For sure. But you see, this is the thing. First of all, those countries that and war within the community is going to affect Kenya as a country and Uganda and Tanzania because it's the East African community. Their problem is our problem, right? But this is the thing. Those wars, even if they are within a country, like they're an internal war, say they're intertribal, all those things you've mentioned are still going to happen, right? Because once there's war, that automatically means there's no stability, right? So, of course, we're going to have a problem even with education, transportation, and all of that. And people are going to seek refuge anywhere, even if it's within a country, right? If your home area there's a war and you're at risk of losing your life, of course, it's a war. So you're going to run elsewhere. It's just that when it's now intercountry, cross border, people are going to run away from this country. I mean, we've seen this over time because when you look at countries, even outside of the East African community, like across the world, when there is war in your country, you will run.
You will run.
You will run
And so-
to go seek help elsewhere, and so that's why you find it keeps spilling over because there's no way you're going to stay at a place where there is a lot of instability.
So let's just actually look at it from this perspective. What are these effects that come about and how do they particularly affect the youths? These are people between the ages of 18 to 35. When we started the podcast conversations, you said that the youth make up the majority of the majority. So that means we are the majority. So that means by the end of the day, if something happens, it affects us more than it affects any other age group. So let's talk about it. What do you think is the greatest effect of the DRC war to the youths in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania?
So the first thing is insecurity. So when there's insecurity, there's a lot of things that will not happen. For example, who's going to send their kids to school when it's a very uncomfortable atmosphere, very risky
You
atmosphere?
see, I'm asking,
and
like,
then
particularly noticing that the DRC was happening in DRC, it has not yet spilled over to Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania.
So are you
specifically.
asking within
right now? When
no,
it has
but what
not-
I'm asking is, are you talking about within DRC or you're talking about
in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania?
how that affects us?
How it
So
has
first of all,
affected us.
trade.
Yeah.
Because there's a exportation and importation. There's, in fact, even schools. There's a lot of Congolese that come to Kenya. There's a lot of people that go there for trade and all of that. So that is first of all affects us directly because no one is going to travel there for trade, and that means your business suffers.
Yeah, your business. Have you ever
And once-
met truck drivers? They always
Yes, long distance drivers.
yes, and
for
they're
sure.
always between the ages of 18 to 40.
Yes, Yes.
Yeah, so
As young as 18.
as young as 18, the minute you get your driver's license in the track, you get, you
Mm.
know, a person who knows another
Yeah.
person, and you get that job.
Yeah.
And you cannot now, you cannot go to Congo. Even
You
before you even
can't.
get to the, like,
Mm.
the diplomacy of the
Mm.
countries,
Mm.
as an individual, you get affected. You and your family is affected just like that.
Yeah, for sure, for
And
sure.
then we get to the companies that hire these people, they get
Mhm.
affected like that. Yeah,
Mm.
so I agree, trade is going to be greatly affected.
Yeah. And once that's pretty much like closing your border.
Yeah,
Once that's
basically.
closed, once there's no flow of money,
Hmm.
that becomes also a very big problem. And that's what I'm telling you. That's why you see Kenya would not step in to help if it would not be good for the region, wouldn't be good for DRC, wouldn't be good for Kenya and all and the neighbors. Because it's not only Kenya that depends on, that has trade with DRC.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's the entire it's
It's
the
the
entire
entire East
it's,
Africa community.
yes.
Yeah, I guess
And
another thing that might be affected is we have young soldiers going
mm,
to DRS,
child soldiers.
child soldiers. Yes,
Yes, yes.
I don't know. I don't know.
That's a
Really, I don't know
very
anyone in the army, so it
Mhm.
might not come really personal to me.
Yes, because you see, once there's a war, every side looks to recruit new members
Hmm.
because you don't want to ever lose. And people get hurt, people die. So you're losing people. So you want
Hmm.
more people. And a lot of the time, it's easier to manipulate children.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about kids like 15-year-olds.
Hmm.
You know, yeah, and they're recruited to join to join the armies.
Hmm.
Whatever camp. If you know what I'm talking about, that is fighting. And then that's even worse because those that are older now still were child soldiers.
They do what?
They were still child
Oh yeah,
soldiers. So
those.
they've fought this over time.
So we have like the intergenerational trauma that comes from
Yeah.
these people.
Mhm.
That's sad. When you really think about it like that, it's sad because
Mm.
you look at someone who's in the army and the
Mhm.
battles that they're facing psychologically and mentally,
Mm.
and it's because they started when they were really, really young.
Mm.
But if we did not have, like, if we had the assurance of peace and security within the region, we wouldn't have such stories.
Mm.
If we knew that South Sudan was not fragile, and
Mm.
Somalia was also not fragile, and now DRC was not, shaky, then essentially our wars would be internal,
Mhm.
and they wouldn't be, I think, as extreme as.
Nobody needs even internal wars. Nobody
Nobody needs
needs
them.
war at
Nobody needs
all.
them.
Yeah.
Definitely, we can agree on that. Nobody
Yeah.
needs the internal wars. But
Mm.
it's important to note that if we had the peace and security, then we would avoid some of these traumas that some of these people are facing,
Mm.
because it spills over to the families. Yeah,
Mhm.
someone has their own devils that they're fighting in the mind, and then they extend it over to the wife, and you hear
Mhm.
uh the wives of policemen or the wives
Mhm.
of army men.
Mm.
They're not, they're not stable
Mhm.
as a family, and it spills over to the children. And now we have a whole generation of people that
Mhm.
have a certain outlook towards life just because they went
Mhm.
through the trauma, you see.
Mm.
I think that is something that people should actually take note of, that such
Mhm.
wars, even if they are without our region, but
Mhm.
then they're within a space where we actually have to participate in,
Mhm.
they affect us. They really do. They affect us.
Mm.
I think another one would have to be the economy becomes shakier.
That's for sure.
Because if we are spending about 4.5 billion just for the next 6 months to deploy troops to DRC,
Mhm.
who is to say how that money would have been used if that war was not there?
Mhm.
So, like, for instance, it could
It's
have
just
been used to boost small businesses. It could have been used for entrepreneurship, to give loans to young people to start up businesses for innovation and things like that.
Mhm.
So it is important to notice that the amount of money that is spent
Mhm.
just during a war is a lot. And if those kinds of funds were channeled into something else, then we would have our economy grow. And in this podcast, we have been talking about the unemployment rates, the economies of East Africa, and it's shaky.
Mhm.
It's very shaky.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
when you read the East African, I think it was last week, November 18th, the
Yeah,
publication
yeah, the
to
last week's copy.
November 13th to the 18th, was
Was
it?
it?
I think so.
Yes. To
Because
the
it's
to the
published
to,
for a
to the
week.
18th. Yes,
Eh,
13th to 18th.
13th to 18th.
Yeah,
They were saying that,
exactly.
but when you look at the amount of money that we are spending by sending troops to the DRC, and
Mm.
you compare it comparatively to what would happen if we didn't send troops to the DRC, we're actually not losing anything.
Mm.
We're not losing anything, because when we talk about all of these effects that could actually um, come out,
Mhm.
even with the risk of DRC going to elections in 2023. When you look at what could happen afterwards, like the refugees and the insecurities and the fears
I
and
mean,
child soldiers.
there's also the health sector,
Mhm.
because people get injured
Yes,
so
yes,
bad.
yes, yes. You know,
Yeah,
you have
and you have to seek.
a lot of amputees and a lot of
Yeah, exactly.
becomes a
You have
problem,
a lot
becomes
of
a really
casualties in
problem.
hospitals, and you see, we already talked about the issue of most public hospitals within the community being very understaffed. So
Yes.
once you have a disaster, once you have an overload,
Hmm.
of patients, then it becomes a different question, because also people who are also suffering from other kinds of diseases, now they
Cannot get
have
the
to be, yeah,
attention.
you
Yeah.
have to be put aside, because now we have an emergency at hand, and the
Hmm.
problem is that it's not a small emergency, it's a
Yeah.
big deal.
It's a
It's
multitude
huge
of people
numbers.
coming in with different kinds of injuries.
Yes. So every single that's why I said, when we have war, every single aspect of your life is affected one way or another.
Hmm.
Yeah. Because you're not making, at even at an individual level, you're probably not making money or making as much as you would have, because if when it comes to businesses definitely suffer.
Hmm.
That's for sure. No
Yeah.
one is going to be buying stuff or spending money just out there extravagantly, and the country is at war or the region is at war, because you don't know when's the next time you're going to be politically stable, or sorry, you're going to be stable in security wise, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you find when it comes to things like education, a sector like education, nobody's going to school.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you you can't be going
You
to
can't
school at
go
such
to
a
school
risky
at
time.
yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
when it comes to even agriculture, you probably have produce, you can't take it to the market, nobody's buying.
Hmm.
When it comes to the health sector, hospitals are overwhelmed. So every single aspect of a human being's life is just basically affected. So that's why it's really, really important that the region is stable, that each country is stable, because then otherwise it becomes risky. And you mentioned it, they're going to elections next year.
Yes, in
And we all
2023.
know the nature of an electioneering period,
Yeah. The tension,
yeah, the
yeah.
kind of tension that is there. We never look up to war. Like we never want for there to be, you know,
Instability of any kind.
in any way,
Hmm.
right? But we're also saying that it's not a possibility. So at the top of everybody's mind,
There's some sort of fear.
everybody's minds, you want to be safe. You want to take care. You want to be extremely careful with what you do, with what you say, with where you're going.
Hmm.
And so it's very bad, because it affects the entire region. It's not just our country, because if country A is at war, then refugees are going to
Spilling
spill
out.
over to country B. Once country B is overwhelmed financially, they need help from
Hmm.
every other country. And
Just
you
when
see,
you
there's
when you look at
usually budgets and such
yeah
kinds of
the
stuff.
yeah
So if there's
there's
times where
like
you find funds are completely exploited,
yes
there's nothing remaining.
they're used to just take care of refugees, and there's nothing remaining for disasters like drought
Mm-hmm.
and famine, which are natural hazards, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
So if we cannot actually shelter ourselves from natural hazards because of wars happening all over the place, then we are not going to make the next step, the next significant step in moving
Mm-hmm.
in our economy, in our financial state, in our state as a country or
Yeah.
as a region
Yeah.
in
But let me
general.
ask you, Angeshi, what is our biggest problem? Why is it that we always have some countries at war, or every single country at one point is at war? What are the causes of these things?
um I think people's understanding of democracy is different. Okay.
Okay,
The
enlighten us.
people's understanding of democracy, this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not basing it on someone else's views. People's understanding of democracy is different.
Mm-hmm.
Some people understand democracy as a my say, my
Mm-hmm.
say,
Mm-hmm.
our say.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, democracy is the say of the people, letting the people rule. But letting the people rule is just basically majority have their way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes minority do not always feel like when the majority have their way that is okay, and that
Mm-hmm.
is actually, I think, the biggest issue when with countries like DRC and even Somali, when the minority feel that they have not been well represented and that democracy has not actually been, the meaning of democracy has not gone as per what they would prefer democracy to mean in this case, they rebel. They rebel against the majority. When they rebel against the majority, you start finding small groups of people coming up. Small groups of people get arms. When they get armed, war begins. It's the same case. When you look at it, it's the same case. Whether it is terrorism or even whether it is just small groups of young people coming up to steal cash or to do whatever. when the minority feel that they're not well represented,
Mm.
and that their understanding of democracy is not the same as the majority's understanding of democracy, then war starts. War starts.
But what I'm
And you see,
wondering
the
is it,
biggest
isn't
problem
it?
with
Yeah.
us,
Mm.
the biggest problem with us is that we have not necessarily created structures where the minority can have a say.
Mhm.
Okay, it's coming up. We are getting there. We are getting there one step at a time. And we have to significantly point out that they have been very significant steps, especially in countries like Kenya, which is, by the way, in the region, one of the democracies. Because Uganda and Tanzania are democracies, semi democracies. That
Mm.
means that the rule of law is not entirely 100%. It has a lot of limitations. So you see, countries like Kenya, there has been significant steps taken towards ensuring peace and security. And you've seen we had terrible fights like the 207 one elections. But as time has come up, we have called for peace and we've called for peace and we've gotten there. But then when the minority, that is because the minority have been given a structure, a platform to actually say, this is what we think we wanted and this is what we want. Okay. But when you put the minority aside, you don't listen to the minority. If that is the kind of democracy that you're practicing, then they're going to rebel. It is pretty obvious that they're going to rebel. Okay. So if you give people a seat in the table, they might just as well listen. If young people in the DRC are asked, all of these people, all of these members of these groups that are actually causing chaos within the country, if they're called and they're told, come, let's talk. And actually, what they say is to some extent implemented to suit both the needs of the minority and the majority, then the war might end. And by view, the war might end. But if they are not heard, if they're not given a platform to speak, if they are not, if by the end of the day they're just going to be set aside as always, they're going to fight. If I am set aside for as long as I'm going to get tired eventually and I'm going to fight. And you have nothing to lose because after all of this time you've always been others. So even if I fight right now, I am fighting for something that might happen someday. So I think that's the thing. The structures of government have not necessarily put the right kind of platforms for these people to actually exercise democracy. And so the definition of democracy is different from the majority. And I could keep singing this song all through, but it's just the
No,
start.
but you see what I'm wondering is you're saying that the view is different, but I think the question is not the view being different. I think it's the actual representation, because if it's a say of, a say by the people, democracy is a rule of the people, by the people, for the people, to the people, to the people. You know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, you have to acknowledge the sovereignty of the people. That's the primary base. But there's a lot of instances, even with Kenya, which you say is a strong democracy, which I have my
in East
reservations.
Africa.
But but the whole point is for the people to be heard. So even if the majority are being heard, of what essence is it if minority are not heard? Because the people, you have to represent the people. And you see, there's the thing, majority passes, but you cannot completely neglect the needs of the minority, because just because this is not a problem by most of the people doesn't mean that some of the people are not being affected by ABCD. It's the same way when say that when there's like some a disaster like drought, it's probably not drought, but maybe like floods. Say it's going to affect region X, you know, um, it doesn't have to affect the whole country, for example, which means technically it's a smaller population as compared to the rest of the population. But that's a big problem. So the people have to be represented. That's probably not the best choice of an example. But what I'm saying is, you could have, you know, a platform for people to speak or have people represented. But if they're not, they don't feel included,
Yeah. So
then we have a problem.
if representation is your point, then I actually agree. Like representation is shaky, and it all comes back to the government, people in government. Are you speaking for and behalf of these people? Because if you're not,
So are we pinning this instability on the government?
we're
Would
not
you say?
necessarily pinning the instability on the government. We're
Yeah.
pinning it on a lot of things.
Yeah.
We're pinning it on, by the end of the day, if you feel not included, whether it's because the system of the government is shaky, or whether because you did not look for the right kind of platform to speak out what you wanted to say. By the end of the day, if you feel excluded, you'll fight. You will fight. Whatever it is you're fighting for, because all of these groups have what they're fighting for. When you listen to their pleas and they're not fighting for out of this world requests. They're fighting for requests that actually can be met if we meet halfway, but then they do not have the platform to say. So they say it where? They say it to the media and take their machetes and go. Say it to the media, take their arms and go.
What
We're
is the
fighting.
place of young people in all of this? Now we've established there's continuous war, right? And we've established young people are as well affected. So what's the position in helping all of this? Just calm down and create a peaceful environment. Because if you look at it, if most of the people affected are young people, and if most of the people fighting are as well young people, it means there is a problem there
There is a
within a
problem,
certain age
yes.
range.
Yeah.
There's a problem. So what do you think can be done by that very particular age range, that particular group? Which in this case, we're just talking about the youth, to help
End this
end
war.
this year and this
The
continuous.
first thing is
Because one
information.
day we're hearing this, the other day we're hearing that.
other thing,
Even when there's
yeah.
a terroristic attack, it's young
It's
people.
always young
it's young
people,
people who are
radicalized
participating.
minds, yeah.
People are being recruited left, right, and center. Even if it's intertribal clashes, most of the time you're not going to find older people fighting there, right? You're probably going to find young people and wanachochana. People are inciting each other left, right, and center. People are grabbing whatever they can, any form of a weapon they can find. They grab it and they cause war. So we can establish that a lot of when there is some sort of fighting going on somewhere, there's a very high chance that a young person or young people are participating, and then as well on the receiving end, young people suffer.
By
Right.
the end of the day,
So
we are
what
the
do
ones
what,
that
what is
suffer
our
from
place?
what?
What is our place to help to
I
make
think
sure
the
that
first
we don't
thing
have this
I
anymore?
will always say this is information. Information is key. Information is key. Information is key. The tagline for Speak Up, and just to take a moment to say it, is inform, engage, and empower.
Yeah.
Once you have information, you can actually be involved in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Once you are involved in a conversation, your voice can then be passed on to the right kind of stakeholders.
Yeah.
The people in these countries that are fighting, if they knew the platforms that they could actually put forward the information that they have, their needs, their pleas, if they could have the right kinds of channel, then they wouldn't have to fight to prove a point. Because I don't think there's anyone that wakes up in the morning and they're like, you know what, today I choose violence. I do
Have
that
you met
sometimes.
people? Have you met people?
I do that sometimes. But I feel like no one wakes up and they're like, you know what? I'm just going to go beat up my neighbors. I'm just going to go rain havoc in my neighborhood just
Again,
because
have you met people? Yes.
people do that. People do that.
Otherwise, we would never have been at war ever.
No, but there must be a push factor. There
That's-
must be a push factor. You wake up one day, you feel like someone wronged me in this way and this way. So you decide, let me go rain havoc because they wronged me in this way and this way. If we had
Have you ever been attacked?
channels-
Have you ever been attacked in the streets or something like that? Did you wrong that person?
I've never
So have
been
you met
attacked.
people?
I've never been attacked.
You've never?
I feel like I hope that day never gets here.
You see, so what I'm saying is someone can be attacked without necessarily having have caused harm or pain or some sort of injury to the other person, is what I'm saying.
I feel like there's still a push factor.
Yeah.
I feel like there's still a push factor. Yes, maybe you're taking it to the wrong people, but
That's
there's
the
a push
thing.
factor. There's a push factor. So if we had the right kind of information on where we could take our pleas, on how to handle all of these, then we might not get together and decide to fight. If we knew, and that is the first thing that young people need to know. Information is power. It is power. Get out there, do your research before you become radicalized to think that religion does not suit you. Actually go out there and do your research before you become radicalized to think that the government is against you. Find out that if it is true that the government is against you, what ought you to do? What do you ought?
Yeah.
Yes.
You-
What do you have to do? What do you have to do? Because it doesn't always have to be a machete for another machete. It could be a conversation that could change the whole narrative. Okay. It could be a referendum that could change the whole narrative. It could be a social media video that could change the whole narrative. You don't have to wake up and decide to fight. Because we have so many internal fights. We have so many young people joining gangs and feeling like we are not part of the society, we're not part of the community. And so let's get together and fight these people because these people have excluded us. There's a lot of mentality that goes outside there. But do you have the right kind of information? Are you using the right kind of channels? Is the question I would ask. Because the minute we stop using the right kind of channels, a war erupts. Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing you, and what you're saying is, young people should explore ADRs, or alternative dispute resolution. I can't speak. Alternative dispute resolution to solve conflicts. Any kind of emerging conflict. There's a lot of things that could be done. Sorry, there's mediation. There's arbitration, guys. You just have a sit down. All these peacekeeping mechanisms. Explore them. Explore all those channels. There's even the courts. There's so many options. There's even religious leaders. Whatever religion you subscribe to, trust you me, there are religious leaders whose main goal and purpose is to ensure that there is peace in society, and so they are always willing to come on board and have these discussions and talk and unite two sides. Yeah, we don't always have to go to war.
We
have
don't
to fight.
always
Yeah.
have to go. War does not have to be an answer anytime, any kind of war. Okay, we also have the non-violent displays of actions. We have people doing that. We have signing petitions, create a petition, circulate it all over. If there are people who are like you and it gets to the right kind of people, change can happen. So if we had that kind of information, we might as well, be able to impact change without necessarily picking up a gun or something. Another thing I would say to young people is young people make up majority of the soldiers. What is your view on soldiers? I see uniform, I ran. I'm not even going to lie to you at this point. I see uniform, I ran. We were talking the other day and someone was saying, which profession would you never date? I was dating a uniformed person. And
I
that
don't
is
know.
because we have some sort of attitude towards these people. And it is such a big issue that when the Kenyan soldiers were deployed to Kismayu, and they actually, I think, because, well, I had got information as a Kenyan, they were able to reduce the significance of Al-Shabaab in Kismayu, and they took over Kismayu. They took over Kismayu from the terrorists.
Yeah.
When they went there, so many reports have been published that say that these people misbehaved.
When you say misbehaved,
The
what do you
Kenyans,
mean?
the Kenyans just misbehaved. There was a lot of issues when it. There's of course the women issue. There's of course the women issue.
What's the women issue? I
There's-
don't know the women issue. You have to tell us.
You
We don't
just
know
want
what
me
we
to
don't
paint
know what
it
the
in
women
black and
issue.
white.
Women issue could be menstruation. Yeah, what do you mean the women issue? Are
My
people
face.
being raped?
Look at my face. Yes, there's cases of such things.
You
There's
scared of
cases
saying
such
raped?
things.
Okay.
I am scared to put that on the Kenyan soldiers of the country that I am affiliated with. I am sad to say that there was things like theft. Let me get you the exact thing. There's always these issues.
Yeah.
And young people are the ones that make up the soldiers that go do these things. I mean, sincerely speaking, we talk about the diplomacies that happen after this. Somalia actually complained about these things. They said that when they went to Kismayo, there was a lot of issues, and then it went to the global issues of the maritime authorities and things like that. And then we had Kenya go to the ICJ and things like that.
Yeah.
When you look at all of this drama, and you're wondering, did it crop up with just people going to help people during a war?
This is the thing, though. It was reported there was a lot of, there's theft, there's rape, there's all this kinds of things happening. But again, this is a place that is at war. You really don't know who the perpetrator of the crime is. So what we always advise in such instances, guys, wait for thorough investigation before you can pin anything on anyone, because at the end of the day, you see, we're trying to find peace, and these are people who are fighting, and these are people who others. Someone can come with their own agenda, right? But these are also people who've been deployed to assist in the attainment of peace, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, anything can always crop up. But what we need is investigations. And what I'm just saying, for me, I'm addressing young people. Every time there is war, why do we always have to be at the center?
Why do we have to be the ones that are propelling the war? Why are we
Exactly.
on the social media front fighting for things? Why are we actually the ones picking up the machete?
We can't be on social media fighting for things. Sometimes we're fighting for the right things.
Sometimes we're fighting for the right things, but why do
Actually,
we have
a lot
to be
of
involved
times.
in war every single time?
No, but I understand what you're saying.
But then
we
we're the
shouldn't
majority
be
of the
in.
majority.
We shouldn't be at war. We should make sure we're ending this whole thing, is what we're saying, because the effects are clearly, they are weighing us down more than they can ever take us forward.
So I got my data. According to a paper that was published by the Italian Institute for Political and International Studies,
Mm.
the Kenyan soldiers were said to have involved themselves in illegal trade of charcoal and sugar.
Of what again?
Charcoal and sugar.
Illegal trade of charcoal and
Charcoal and sugar.
sugar.
Let me tell you what happens when
That
there's a
whole
war.
charcoal thing needs an entire conversation. Yeah, because it's the whole thing with
The thing
deforestation.
is, when there's war,
Mm.
there's hoarding.
Yeah.
There's hoarding.
Mm.
Basic amenities are not very available to everyone.
Never.
So someone who has them hoards them. You
Mm.
hold them
Mm.
for a while until when they become
Mm.
like gold,
Mm.
and then you sell them out.
Mm.
You sell them out.
Mm.
So that could happen. I'm seeing
Mm.
how that
Yeah.
could happen. I'm really seeing how that could happen. But you Museveni said to the Ugandan troops that were deployed in Somalia, he said, "You are representing Uganda.
Yeah, you are for
You're
sure
representing
the
right now.
country.
You're an ambassador of a country.
Mm.
If we are the young people, these people between the ages of 18 to 40, 18 to 35, if you are the people that are representing them, why are you involving yourself in such illegal trades? Why do we have stories of rape? Why do we have stories of prostitution in a country that is very strict with things like prostitution? Why do we have stories like that coming back to the ground?
Mm.
But at the end of the day, when Kenya took over Kismayu, it was a hooray moment for Kenya, at least. Even if we had lost Kenyan soldiers, and may their souls rest in peace. Even though we had lost Kenyan soldiers, but at the end of the day, when they came back to us victorious. But what happened? The diplomatic issues that happened, the stories that happened later, they're not good news. We don't want things like that coming back to us. We want young people to take up the responsibility of being soldiers and to take it up seriously. If you decide that is the future that you want to be yours, then take it up seriously. And if you don't want that, then don't go for it. Don't feel coerced to actually join the army for this or that reason.
Yeah, what we're just saying is basically we are looking at things at the kinds of things and we're basically just particularly addressing crime, things that young people involve themselves with that are really not on the good side. In the previous episodes, we talked about how the government is failing young people, but we're also talking about how the young people are failing young people. And what we're saying at the end of the day is we really need to look at ourselves and we really need to take serious things seriously. Yeah, because when we involve ourselves in things like crime, things like war, things like they're all crime, but like raping people, and guys, it's not a reputation anybody wants, and the effects of them are really grand.
They're dire. They're
So
dire
let's
on a nation. They're dire on a people, a community, and a society. You do
Yeah.
not want to be tagged as the person that started that kind of story.
Mm.
So by the end of the day, what do we do as young people? We get the right kind of information. Learn your information. Learn the platforms. Like she said, there's so
And
many
involve
ways to solve
yourselves in
conflicts.
in forward projects, for lack of a better word.
In
If
forward
you're just
projects.
chilling there, like if you're there's a lot of community projects, there's a lot of there's even community services, those
Become
kinds
a
of things.
change maker.
Yeah, if you are doing something, then you're not going to be idle to think about going out there propagating
I don't
crime.
think essentially crime and war is idleness.
You don't think?
I think by the point you get
Can I
to the
ask
point
you
of starting
something?
a group and a gang of people, it's not necessarily idleness it's passion to get something across. It's passion to actually fight for something. I mean, have you been involved in a university strike?
No,
I haven't.
I'm a peace-loving human
for
being.
the cameras, I haven't. But for those people that were,
If you're
when
asking whether
fighting
I've ever
something,
picketed, yeah, I've ever
if you're fighting for
demonstrated
something,
on the street, yes, I've ever, but
you
not in a
see,
university
it's
strike.
because
No,
you
no,
were
no, no.
fighting for something that you wanted.
It was a match,
non-violent.
a match, a very peaceful demonstration. A girl was raped. We were fighting.
Exactly.
for
Let's
her
use
rights.
that example. I hate to say this, but in a situation where someone was raped by a community that you feel like people around you are not doing anything about it, then you go for that walk. It starts with that walk and people don't do anything. You go carrying banners and people don't do anything. You write petitions
So
and
you have
people
so
don't
you
do
start killing
anything.
people.
No. I'm telling you, it gets to a point where your passion exits things and you start killing people.
But what I'm
sorry
saying
to say
is, but
that. I'm just
what I'm saying is that there are channels. You must
exactly.
explore every single channel, and war or fighting should never
It should
be
never
an
be an
option.
option. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I think we
Yeah.
can agree that war is not an option. As young people, I feel like DRC is made up is fighting. The government is fighting against small groups of young people who got together for one reason or the other, got the fundings from wherever they wanted to get the fundings, and then they became armed, and now they're fighting one after another, one after another. And the war will never end if that is how we're going to go down. The war will never end if we feel like fighting is the solution. It will never end. So it is us as young people, we need to actually have a call to action. Stop the war. We need to stop it. We need to make that decision to, if we are going to demonstrate, we're going to do it peacefully. If we're going to call out our governments, we're going to do it using the right kind of channels. We're going to get that information. We're not just going to sit back and be part of that war, do not be part of that war. I think that's the biggest call to action from this episode. Don't be part of that war. And if you're going to be a soldier, please represent the country that you're from well. Like Museveni said when he to the troops in Somali, you are representatives of Uganda. So you're representatives of Uganda, you're representatives of Tanzania, you're representatives of Kenya. Represent them well.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of that discussion. What we are taking home from this episode today is basically just be a change maker. Right? Remember to follow us across all our social media platforms at Speak Up Africa. Again, the K is always constant. My name is Anyona Bulungu.
And my name is Wangeshi Karemi. Thank you for joining us.
See you in the next episode.